There are stories that are hard to grasp with the mind. Crimes the whole world has heard about. But today, I won't talk about the perpetrators. Today, I'll talk about those who never asked for their names. The children of serial killers.
My name is Melissa Moore, and my dad is a serial killer.
People who had to live with the stigma of someone else's sins. Some disappeared, some changed their names, and some, well, that's exactly what you'll find out in this material. BTK killer's daughter, Kerri Rawson. For 30 years, Kerri genuinely believed she had the best dad in the world. Only later did she discover that her father was one of the most terrifying serial killers in U.S. history. Today, she's a best-selling author and activist. She teaches other victims of abuse how to survive. Michael Bear Carson. Daughter, Jen Carson. Jen Carson, his daughter, has admitted that she grew up with trauma, living in the shadow of her father's brutal crimes. In one interview, she recalled, "I started wondering if I might have the monster gene myself." Jen is publicly opposed to the possibility of her father's early parole. She said in an interview that despite his age, that doesn't make him safe, and in a year or less, someone else could be dead. She now works supporting children of convicted parents, helping them cope with the loss of a parent and the trauma caused by the prison system. Melissa Moore, daughter of Keith Hunter Jesperson. In 1995, when Melissa was a teenager in high school, her mother called her and her siblings down to the basement and told them that their father had been arrested for murder. That was the moment Melissa learned that the man she knew as her dad was actually a serial killer. Despite the trauma, Moore eventually chose to speak openly about her story. In 2009, she published her memoir, Shattered Silence. And in the years that followed, she got involved in media work, podcasts, appearances. She's since become a voice for people living with the stigma of having a serial criminal in the family. The adopted son of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. The term adopted son of the Unabomber doesn't refer to a biological or legal child of Ted Kaczynski. He never had kids. The phrase is used metaphorically in the media and activist circles, a young admirer searching for a mentor. As a teenager, he became interested in the philosophy of isolation, anarchism, and critiques of technology. Kaczynski's writings impressed him, not for the violence, but for the intellectual arguments against industrialization. In letters to Kaczynski, he wrote about feeling misunderstood, family issues, and social isolation. Kaczynski replied with cold, harsh, almost emotionless letters. That's why the young man later described him as a cold man. After cutting ties with Kaczynski, he focused on social work, organizing events on ideological manipulation, supporting people who had fallen into radical circles, and speaking about how easily a young person can be manipulated by a cold, intellectual extremist. He became a symbol of breaking free from toxic ideology. Ariel Castro Jr., a child born out of captivity. Ariel Castro Jr. has become an ordinary, anonymous guy. That was his goal. After the scandal broke in 2013, Ariel Anthony Castro appeared in public only a few times, including writing a letter to a local newspaper. Later, he pulled away from the media completely. No interviews, no public appearances, no celebrity life. He openly said he wants to disappear from the headlines because the name Castro has become a burden. Charles Manson's children. Charles Manson Jr. died by suicide at the age of 40. Very little is known about Manson's second son, Charles Luther Manson, according to the Las Cruces Bulletin. He never met his father. Michael Bruner also never knew Manson and had no contact with him growing up, and he ignored his biological father's attempts to reach out from prison. Today, Michael avoids the spotlight and works in the industry. If you're still watching, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. Thanks! The son of the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. Matthew Ridgway is the only child of Gary Ridgway, one of the most dangerous serial killers in U.S. history. Even though his father took the lives of at least 49 women, Matthew grew up believing he had an ordinary, loving dad. Matthew Ridgway keeps an extremely low profile. From what journalists have been able to uncover, he worked for a logistics and warehousing company, lived in Seattle for a while, and has a wife and children. The Yorkshire Ripper's son. A life in hiding. After Peter Sutcliffe was arrested, his son vanished. He changed his name, his surname, and even the country he lived in. His identity is kept secret to protect him from being hunted down. Mary Ann Cotton's children. Mary Ann Cotton was a 19th-century English serial killer, suspected of being behind the deaths of many people, including around 11 of her own children. She usually used arsenic to collect insurance payouts or to claim someone's property. The children were said to be sick or were reported to have died of SIDS. At least 2 of her children actually made it to adulthood. George Robinson, born 1864, the son of Mary Ann and James Robinson. Genealogy records suggest he grew up, reached adulthood, and lived a normal life far away from his mother's notorious story. Margaret Edith Cotton, born 1873, the daughter of Mary Ann and Frederick Cotton, and Mary Ann's last child. Parish records suggest she survived childhood and lived for many more years, though the details of her later life aren't well documented. Ted Bundy. Daughter, Rosa Bundy. Rosa Bundy was born in 1982, after her father was already in prison. She grew up away from the public eye. The media and documentary makers try to respect her privacy, and little is known about her adult life. Children of Fred and Rose West. The tragic fate of the family horror survivors. Fred and Rose West were a pair of British serial killers who committed crimes for years. Investigators eventually found the remains of multiple victims in their home. One of those victims was their own daughter. Their children grew up in extremely abusive, chaotic conditions, and many of them were exploited. One daughter who survived and later chose to speak publicly about what she'd lived through described her childhood as constant fear, shame, and having to hide all the time. Her testimony is one of the starkest examples of how parents' crimes can devastate their children's lives. Children of Edward Wayne Edwards. One of his daughters, April Balacio, grew up unaware that her father was a serial killer. As an adult, she began connecting childhood memories with facts and ultimately helped authorities bring him to justice. In her book, she recalls how her father could be affectionate and take care of them, something that later clashed painfully with the horror of discovering his crimes. Today, she says she's trying to reconcile her childhood with her adult life. I'm trying to hold on to the good parts, even if my father was a monster. Like father, like son. Joseph Kallinger. Joseph Kallinger was an American serial killer known as the Shoemaker. Between 1974 and 1975, he murdered 3 people and terrorized 4 families, and he didn't do it alone. His accomplice was his 12-year-old son, Michael. Kallinger's own childhood was deeply traumatic. He was put up for adoption, and his adoptive parents raised him with extreme brutality. He was beaten, starved, isolated, and abused both physically and mentally. His relationship with his son, Michael. In November 1974, Kallinger pulled his then 12-year-old son into a string of robberies and murders across Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New Jersey. During the break-ins and attacks, Michael actively helped his father, making this case one of the most disturbing examples of how a parent's influence can twist a child who sees them as an unquestioned authority. According to accounts, Michael was heavily under his father's control, and grew up in an environment filled with violence and dysfunction. Bringing him into the crimes shows how Kallinger created a world where dominance, abuse, and manipulation replaced care and safety. A court later ruled that Michael acted under his father's control, and he was sent to a juvenile facility. After serving his sentence, he changed his name and tried to hide his identity once he was released. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date.